Render, a project that is absolutely exploding right now. It's exploding because it sits in Depin, decentralized physical infrastructure networks that are now garnering more attention than ever before. In this video, I'm going to break down what Depin is and a specific area of Depin that no one's really talking about that will leave the likes of Render and Akash for dead. These render killers that I'm going to cover in this video, you really need to be paying attention to, and if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll tell you how you can get involved in pre-sales for some of these projects. So do me a favor, hit that like button. Let's get into today's video. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about this whole Depin narrative throughout most of last year. All I knew was Render Network, and I covered it on the channel multiple times. But it wasn't until I read this State of Depin report on Messari at the end of last year that I suddenly woke up. Since then, I then made multiple videos talking about various stuff to do with Depin that dated back to December. And it still seemed around that time that no one was really talking about the potential that was on offer in this space, until more recently we saw Coin Bureau and then Miles Deutscher jumping in on the action. And before we dive deeper into really the potential opportunity within this space that is far above anything else in crypto, in my opinion, we need to understand that Depin is a very large and broad landscape. And every time I'm making a video, people are like, yeah, but this project's also in Depin. Do you think this is going to do well? We need to understand that Depin is made up of different sectors, and only a handful of these sectors I think are going to outperform the rest of the market. You got things like physical resources, things like sensors for temperature and other bits and pieces that you might have in food fridges. You got Depin modules, but the most interesting area for me sits within the compute and storage networks. Now, you'll notice if you look into this image within the compute sector, you'll see projects like Akash, like Render, and others that have been absolutely flying recently. And as we look across to Google Trends and look for Depin on a worldwide search, this shows us the search volume on YouTube right now. We can start to see a surge in activity. Now, why do we think that Depin is really gaining more attention than anything else? Well, because last year, Depin alone generated $15 million in on-chain revenue. And right now, that figure is already exploding and will go way beyond that in this year. And I'll explain why that is later on. But unlike many of the other projects out there where you're like, this is a really good blockchain and they've got amazing partnerships, none of them are really making huge amounts of money, with the exception of like Ethereum and Solana, which are making crazy cash, and that's what I'm very excited about. If you watched my video yesterday, you'll understand that the bigger institutional money is going into the market right now before we kind of gaining the public attention. The institutional money will then be driving the public into particular projects through their marketing processes, and that's where we're going to see the biggest gains. But what do institutions do that we don't? Many of us are just looking for what the popular coin of the day is, and that's already pumping. Like everyone's now searching for Jasmy and other coins that are already ripping it towards the upside. But we want to be thinking like the institutions. We want to be seeing the value projects that are going to be making explosive amounts of money over the next few years. And that's why Depin is now gaining loads of attention. And what is really exciting, well, everyone's like, we're waiting for a recession and whatever else, everything about crypto and investments comes from who's got the cash flow ready to invest. Right now, cash held by corporations is an all-time high. This means that they're looking to go into riskier assets because they got loads of money to be putting into projects within cryptocurrency, more risky assets because they're cash rich. Now, before we dive into the cloud compute networks where I think we're going to see the biggest gains, let's think about storage. Now, right now, there's a few companies in the world that have centralized storage solutions like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, names that you've probably heard of. But a lot of these are incredibly expensive. Now, why are we seeing such a growth in storage and compute networks? Well, it's particularly because of a growth scaling issue associated with the development of AI. If we look into this image, you can see it took only 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million users. We now have the likes of Claude.ai, the one I use, and a bunch of other machine learning tools coming in. And you can see the projected hardware spend is absolutely insane, reaching around $1.7 trillion by 2030. And this huge demand is now for things like storage that require to hold huge amounts of data, and also for the compute services that drive it. And as we look into storage networks, which I've shown you multiple times if you are subscribed to this channel, and I've been talking about over the last few months, then you'll realize that there's a few coins that sit down here that when you look at a chart like this, it makes absolutely all the sense in the world that people will be starting to use decentralized networks, such as Filecoin and Arweave. Compared to paying $23 for a terabyte per month, you can now pay 19 cents on Filecoin. And this is one of the biggest things I want you to start focusing on. If you're new to crypto, I get it, okay? Lots of like projects sound very exciting and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. But think about something that's going to force people to have to use decentralized solutions. This is one, because the storage solution supply is doing a 5x each year, but the demand is doing a 10x, which means it's outstripping the supply. Therefore, 100% people are going to be forced to look for storage solutions in the blockchain. And I've been telling you that for at least the last 2 months. And recently, when we've seen this narrative starting to wake up, we can see Filecoin's pumped 56%. But I think Filecoin, given where it's at right now compared to where it's been, I think is one of the biggest potential coins out there with something like a 25 to 30x in this space. I've also been talking about a competitor to Filecoin, which is Arweave. In my opinion, slightly less exciting tech, but again with a good opportunity to see good growth going forward. Currently at $13, but it wouldn't surprise me if this project again hits towards $100 or more. And look, this is the growth of the industry within the storage area right now. Those projects, Arweave and Filecoin, are still very early. Look at the market size growing over time in US dollars, okay? Up to $472 billion by the year 2030, decentralized storage networks. Okay, it's time to jump into the decentralized compute arena, the one that really gets me fizzing, okay? If you could ever get fizzing over any particular crypto, although there are a lot of people who are fizzing over a few other digital coins. I get it, it's exciting. You form your little crypto armies for ICP and Casper. But really, guys, it's player versus player. And if you subscribe, I'll teach you to be better than the other players out there just by knowing stuff like this. Going back to that Messari report that happened around the end of last year, you'll see Depin generates money. And if you go further into this report, it'll tell you that the biggest, oldest, most important one, or at least the biggest earner, is going to be compute marketplaces. Now, let's think about what a compute marketplace might really be. Let's say my phone or my laptop or whatever is running on like CPUs or GPUs, depending on what device you're using. That's like the brain behind it, it's what's running it. However, for lots of different types of projects, there is a big demand on this compute power because it's expensive to buy all the GPUs and it's easier to just rent them out for a certain amount of time when you need them. Now, we're seeing a huge growth in the Render network. Render's a decentralized compute platform that specializes in rendering scenes. So for example, if you're in a video game and you're like turning around to look at something, everything gets rendered in front of you so that you can see all the information. It's used in movies, it's used in special effects and other bits and pieces. And there is somewhat of a demand going on in that space right now, which is why we're seeing growth in Render. And you can see again, continued annual growth rate, 28.6% all the time. And by around 2030, it's projected to be somewhere around $3 to $4 billion. And you're like, okay, hold on, how much is Render worth right now? Well, I'm pretty glad you asked me that question, guys, because it's actually worth right now $2.8 billion in an industry that's going to be worth $3 billion by 2030, and is not just Render that's doing this. Other companies are also wading in on this space. So we see a bit of a problem, right? The whole industry is not really worth maybe enough to support a project with already a market cap size of $2.8 billion. Now, obviously, it's not one-to-one, okay? Most companies don't make their value in like a single year. Usually they're around 10 to 20x of their valuation of their annual revenue. But it seems the market that Render's in is not really going to be that explosive. And you're like, well, yeah, but they can handle lots of other compute network tasks, might be, you know, just lending like GPU compute stuff back into the network. But there's one key thing that many are missing, because recently I posted about projects like Ether and IO.net and GPU.net, which we'll look into a little bit in just a moment. And then everyone's like, well, what about gaming.io, okay, where you can basically lend your GPU power back into the server, earn tokens in order to go and buy video games and stuff like that. A very cool project and one that I'm very bullish on. But the GPU power they're harnessing is not suitable for all tasks within the compute network space, because it's all dependent on the type of GPU. And if you've ever recently looked at the top NASDAQ companies, you'll notice that there is one company that is rising above the rest, and it will give us a clue as to maybe where we should be looking in this compute narrative space and what things those compute networks must be able to offer, because they are not all the same. Nvidia is a pretty new company based in the US, suddenly has exploded into 6th in the rankings, and it's basically like the oil of the digital world, where you can see Saudi Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, is 3rd, is only 33% bigger than Nvidia's market cap right now. And you're like, okay, fine, okay, I think I'm following, but why is the Nvidia stock exploding right now? Well, it's exploding because there's a huge demand for GPUs. There's a big demand for GPUs because of the growth of GameFi, because of the growth of other different tech industries, but most importantly, there's one industry above all others that is driving this growth, and it is AI. AI is an incredibly large and demanding beast that requires enterprise-grade hardware. Typically, these GPUs are things like H100 GPUs, which I'm told are the dog's bollocks of GPUs, and the only thing that can be used in machine learning tools. Now, machine learning. Now, let's think about it. ChatGPT is obviously an incredibly powerful program. You've probably used it. You probably understand that this can't be an easy thing to pull off. And they have to be fed huge amounts of data and huge amounts of compute power for these companies to learn all this information and then to be able to process it and give an output in an autonomous way without any human input. It's like creating a digital human mind. So we understand that that's a difficult thing to do. Whereas maybe providing computer power to like video games and stuff is like a sort of a slightly lower level. Therefore, we can't broad brush all these compute projects as one, because some of them have the capacity to deal with this machine learning demand, and some of them don't have that capacity at all because they don't hold the right GPUs. And then lots of people come in and like, okay, well then that just sounds really centralized and whatever. Here's an example of IO.net, a brand new project that is getting launched very soon, I think. And they basically have clusters of NVIDIA GPUs all around the world, where they have 20,000 GPUs, of which are enterprise-grade GPUs that can support things like machine learning. And these 20,000 are stationed in different countries around the world, which means they can always support your demands whenever that is. They'll also be able to work when demand is low in certain places. And if the demand in certain areas for these GPUs is lower, they can rely on those, and that brings down the overall cost of offering this back into the network. Typically, to create a program like ChatGPT can cost anywhere from like $3 to $30 million to feed all that information in. However, this is going to bring down those costs absolutely massively. But most importantly, it's not just the cost, it's just the availability. Everything in this space, supply and demand. IO.net compute requirements for AI apps are increasing by 10x every 18 months, but the supply is only doing 2x every 18 months. Again, this is where we know that people have to start using these types of projects. And it's not going to be the likes of Render. It's not going to be the likes of Akash, because they just don't have access to the right equipment. While we will still see growth in these projects, I think really once these like next generation projects, such as IO.net that we just mentioned, move into the space, they're all going to get absolutely left behind. And just remember, guys, $1.7 trillion anticipated spend on the hardware by 2030, compared with that thing with Render, where it was like $3 billion. $1.7 trillion is an insanely large amount of money. It's expected by 2030 that 1% of the US's GDP could be being spent on decentralized global compute networks. Have I made myself clear? I'm not telling you off. I'm getting a bit excited, okay? I don't really get that excited about lots of things in crypto because it's a bit nerdy, but I get excited about, making money and being able to find something and understand really in a huge amount of depth, which I have made Depin narrative my kind of thing, and I'm going to continue to drill down into it further and find new projects that are launching in the space all the time, and I'll bring them to you. Subscribe. Now, what else is very important about this particular thing? I want to think about like Ethereum and whatever, and I know I'm rambling a bit, but stick with me. Ethereum, the more people that are using that network, great, it kind of, it drives Ethereum, they make lots of money, but right now, if you've ever tried to use it on a busy day in the markets, it's costing so much money to make those trades. Why? Because it can't cope with that, okay? There's not enough bandwidth, effectively. They then have to drive up the cost for you to be able to get your transactions through, and it's an inefficient model. However, Depin works in a slightly different way. The more people that are starting to use these GPUs, the more people will then enter in and start creating nodes and things like that, because the rewards are going up. Because overall, there's more power to provide to the network. So the more power the network has, the more money it makes, the more people want to enter in and support and provide more power to the network. It's called the Depin network flywheel, and typically what it means is the project becomes more valuable and more useful the more people that use it. I talked about this in the AIOZ video I made a good month or so ago, where they're starting to bring in things like nodes. And it does look like we're going to be able to offer an early node sale very soon for one of the biggest projects that I'm so excited about right now. Now, IO.net, basically an aggregator, it takes all the different GPU power together. It's like a marketplace. It will then sell it back to the projects who need it, taking kind of like a cut along the way. And I have done deeper dives before on IO.net, but, go and have a look at the website. It's pretty technical. There is a lot of information available, but you can see, this is what I was talking about. NVIDIA H100s tells you what they've got available. all these other bits and pieces. And this project, along with all the others that I've mentioned today, they're all making money. Almost unheard of in the world of crypto. Another project to be excited about with a much smaller market cap is GPU.net, that also have a partnership, you can see, with NVIDIA, therefore have access to those chips within those different data centers around the world. Again, a project that's actually making money with an exciting roadmap ahead, and all of the teams within all of these projects are all fully doxed, guys, which is an important thing to be paying attention to. You can go and have a look at this website, learn more about GPU.net. Now, I just want to say, not sponsored by any of these projects, guys. This is a completely neutral deep dive into all of them. However, through the inner circle, we do have a pre-sale coming up with Ether, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And I guess that's our association with that project. So what is Ether? Well, again, distributed cloud infrastructure for gaming and AI is kind of fairly similar to what we just talked about with IO.net. Again, has access to over 20,000 H100 GPUs, which is enterprise grade. Last year, they made around $10 million. Remember, the entire Depin space made about $15 million last year. Ether, after its launch, is expected to do $20 to $30 million this year. And why I'm very excited to offer a pre-sale for this, which I'll talk about in a minute. They've already got over 200k users, loads of key partnerships with key brands like Animoca Brand, Bybit, etc. This is also a key thing. When you've got new projects that are yet to launch, and you can see they've already got key partnerships with big exchanges, that's another very positive thing, tells us good things about where they're going to be launching. Now again, this is geared towards gaming, but also geared towards AI. The two bigger narratives within the whole crypto space. When these two do well, the Depin that kind of fits underneath it is going to be absolutely crazy. Now, I have covered Ether before, but I wanted to talk about a new product that's come out of Ether called a phone, which I really like the concept of. Now, obviously, around the world, countries are in different stages of development, which means they have access to different tech, and the money in different people's pockets for doing similar jobs within different places is different. This means that people have been limited to sort of the tech and things that they're able to access. Because if your monthly take home might be just a few $100s, then you're probably not really looking to go and buy iPhones and things like that. However, with this iPhone thing, which is actually really cool, you have the ability to use like a cloud phone, which means you could have like a $50 or $100 smartphone and be able to access through an app like a cloud iPhone 15. Hopefully that makes sense. It's super fast because it comes from a decentralized network. So you're then accessing all the different features and things of a phone that is incredibly expensive compared to maybe like a $50, $100 smartphone. And I think it's worth giving a follow because they do say that they have an airdrop coming up, and I will look to find out how to enter into this airdrop and also update you as it happens with like a tutorial on how to do it, because it makes a lot of sense. It's a cool project, and I think this means you can rent like other phones for like $1 a month, which is great. I'm really excited about the concept of crypto and opening up the playing field, like leveling the playing field for the whole world when it comes to access to tech and access to education. I think it's a really important thing and a very valuable thing going forward. Now again, all these projects, with the exception of like Arweave, Filecoin and Render Token, are all like in the early stages. They have yet to launch tokens. Now I believe GPU.net will be launching around Q2 2024, but I might be wrong. IO.net probably around similar time. I think Ether around the end of Q1 2024. The good news is that in the next few weeks, we'll be raising money through our venture capital fund, which is linked down below, for this Ether project. And you can also invest pre-ICO for a heavily discounted price. Now, typically, to be a VC investor, you need a minimum of $100,000 to invest in these projects. And what we do is we basically use the community to fill those allocations as a group where you can invest for like $500 or whatever else. And I'll be telling you on Monday how a project that we raised for in December has literally just done a 50x on launch, which means if you put in $500, you'd be sat on 25 grand right now. But more of that to come on Monday. Not only that, but for $19.99 per month, and that is it, guys, you'll be able to access the Inner Circle chat where you can talk to various other people around the world who are spending a lot of time in crypto, and you get access to these trading calls from 4 or 5 key crypto traders who are making great calls on a daily basis. Even me making calls like this one with AIOZ, where we hit our 3-to-1 take profit in just a couple of days. So if you basically want trading signals, you can see where you can get on with people like this, seeing ICP trade update, both take profit smashed, and you want access to pre-sales where you can potentially see a 50x on launch, all sorts of other bits and pieces, then for just $19.99, getting the link down below in the description, absolutely the best deal out there. And in my opinion, I might be biased, nothing offers better value than that. If you enjoyed today's video, then I urge you to hit the like button, because, you know, sub story, I put in a lot of effort and time making these, and it would be really great if you help me out. And you will help me out massively by hitting that like button. And also, if you want to see something different, you want to get ahead of the trend so that you can hear about Depin a month or so before the likes of Coin Bureau tell you about it, then make sure you subscribe, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow, Saturday, in another video. Bye-bye.